Welcome everyone back to a new Marvel Rivals video. So in the past, each video slash storyline was connected to a map, and that's how the layout of these videos were set up. That's still the case for the most part. Like the upcoming 2099 Mutant storyline is still connected to Krakoa, and same with Cap and Bucky's story, and of course the seasonal stories. But for this video and another video after, these stories are kind of on their own, but they're essential to the overarching story and will have more use in the future. So for this video and the next one, I'm gonna go ahead and push out these smaller stories that still push the narrative. But anyways, we'll be talking about the start of the 2099 Resistance. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. So to start off this story, we are going to be talking about Natasha Romanoff, aka the Black Widow. This version of her does live in 2099, but is actually from the modern day era. She was given a super soldier serum variant that has kept her in shape, strong, and slowed her aging, keeping her alive for this long. Of course, given the circumstances, most of her friends are dead, but now she leads the Red Room along with the resistance against Doom. One day she came to Tokyo on a special mission for the resistance. After her mission, she started to feel at home in Tokyo, more at home than she's felt in decades, which was odd. Despite her having connections all over the world, she had no idea what secrets Alchemax was hiding. Alchemax was a major multinational pharmaceutical corporation with far too much power and even more secrets. Most of them were under clearances called lead and all the way up to gold. But until today, she's never heard of an asset called mercury. Fortunately for someone like her, getting into the building was easy. She knew this mercury asset was in a sub-basement. She knew she had a long way to go. She made her way down the elevator shaft, then down some stairs, taking out guards along the way. Natasha hacked her way into the vault. Upon entering, she reached a terminal. She read a folder called Project Rising Eagle. She realized something. These systems weren't using Alchemax security codes. They were encryption protocols used by the Public Eye, which is a police force that kept all of Tokyo under its thumb. What's going on here? She said to herself. She went through folders on super soldier serums from 100 years ago, medical benefits of Krakoan flowers, ancient chemical equations, and various name and code names like greater science, secret alchemy, and quiet math. The most jarring stuff she found was surveillance photos of her and Nick Fury. Before she could dig deeper, a strange noise caught her attention. A beeping, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. She was led to the center of the room to see tubes in a large piece of ice, with what looked like a shadow in it, like a human figure. She initiated a thawing sequence. Once the cloud of mist disappeared, she saw something she recognized. It was a man, the same one that she saw on TV screens and files back in her days of the Red Room, something that Russia despised. It was Captain America. But he died in World War II, didn't he? He rose to his feet. Red Skull, he said, a mixture of panic and determination in his voice. Where is he? Dead, Natasha replied. For about 50 years now, soldier. What? Cap said, trying to gain his bearings. How? This isn't the war anymore, Natasha said. Not the same one you remember, at least. Cap gazed around at the high-tech machinery in the room with awe and confusion. Last thing he remembered, he was on board a doomed plane over the Arctic Ocean. Where are we? He asked, not sure he wanted to know the answer. You might also want to ask, when are we? Natasha replied. The answer is Tokyo 2099. Tokyo, Cap said, suddenly even more on guard. We're behind enemy lines? It's not like that anymore, Natasha said. These days it's not about the borders. It's about freedoms. It always has been, Cap said. Fair enough, Natasha agreed. And now you have yours. Thanks to you, Cap replied, knowing that without his friend's aid, he would still be suspended in a deep freeze. That won't last long if we don't get out of here, Natasha said, leading Cap towards the doors of the chamber. Alchemax was keeping you on ice for a reason. We don't want to be here when they realize you've thawed out. Too late, Cap said, as a battalion of heavy armed guards burst their way through the chamber doors. Public Eye, Natasha said, recognizing the guards in the uniforms. Never heard of them, Cap responded as he blocked a guard's electrified nightstick with his forearm. But I can't say they don't remind me of someone. They're no Hydra. Natasha said, kicking away one of the public eye officers, but they're just as good as making sure the citizens under their protection are living in constant fear. Let me guess, Cap said, his fists flying. They think they're the good guys. They always do. Natasha laughed. Some things never change, Cap mused, wishing that he had his trusty shield with him as he knocked back another guard. We need to get out of here, Natasha said, fighting her way towards the chamber door. We don't stand a chance against this many of them in such a tight space. Lead the way, said Cap, covering Natasha's back as they made their escape to the stairwell. Cap and Natasha worked their way up 5 flights of stairs back to the lobby of the Alchemax building, taking out constant flow of public eye soldiers along the way. The two fought in perfect unison, almost as if they've been partners for years. Though she preferred to work on missions alone, for once Natasha was glad to have a new ally by her side. As they reached the lobby, leaving a trail of unconscious guards in their wake, they were met by one of the public eye's giant mechs, a heavily armed robotic drone used to police the streets of Tokyo and keep dissonance in line. Go, Cap said to Natasha. I've got this. No, Natasha replied. We can't risk you falling back into their hands. Cap leaped towards the drone, narrowly dodging a blow from its oversized mechanical fist. He reached up and grabbed a hold of a circular plate of metallic armor on the robot's shoulder, ripping it off with ease. I'll be fine, Cap said with a smile, holding the disc of armor like a shield. I used to be able to do this all day. Time to find out if that's still true. As Natasha reluctantly raced towards the lobby's main exit, Cap hurled the armored plate at the drone's torso, slicing right through its core circuitry. The mech began to spark wildly. Suddenly, its single eye turned a bright red. Self-destruct protocol initiated, the drone said in a synthesized voice. Well, that's new, Cap said under his breath, realizing the critical mistake he just made. Natasha turned back and rushed to help Cap, but it was too late. The drone erupted in an enormous burst of flame that filled the lobby. Cap leaped on top of Natasha, protecting her from the burst, but the shockwave from the explosion still hit them both hard. Natasha's vision went blurry as she hit the ground. Moments passed and she regained her senses. She looked around for the man who had just rescued her from a fiery fate, but he was nowhere to be found. Where had he gone? The answer would have to wait. Sirens were blaring nearby. The public eye was about to bring in backup, and Natasha needed to get as far away as possible. The Black Widow managed to disappear into the night, as she had done so many times before. Her mission had been partially successful, but she wouldn't be able to rest until she knew what happened to Captain America. For the first time in ages, Natasha had been caught by surprise. Not only by the legendary hero in the block of ice, but by the unusual feeling he had inspired within her. Something she hasn't felt in decades. Hope. Alongside Black Widow in the year 2099, we see an ally named Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. This was not too long after the events of Black Widow's lore entry. Punisher's lore entry starts like this. In a warehouse on the lower levels of a forgotten district of Tokyo, far below the strange webs that had woven themselves throughout the sky, there the Yashida Corporation, once one of Japan's greatest crime families and now a multinational manufacturing powerhouse, was set to meet with a mysterious new syndicate rumored to be making a move for power in New York City. While the Yashida Corp had gone legit decades ago, they still had a number of illicit operations hidden in their books, dealing in everything from narcotics to weapons. Tonight the focus was on the latter. Let's get down to business, shall we? The man representing the Castigliones said in a gruff voice. Bold, Shiru said with a smile. I already like you, Mr. Tower, the man replied coldly. Johnny Tower. Now, what have you got for me? The Yashida core crew wasted no time unveiling a table covered in a wide array of high-tech weaponry unlike anything that had been seen on the streets of Tokyo or any other city. Plasma cannons, EMP grenades, vibro knives, and countless other innovations designed solely to cause their targets the most damage and pain possible. These were weapons of war, and the Yashidas had no qualms about unleashing them on innocent people of New York, for the right price, of course. After the Yashidas finished the presentation, Tower paused for what seemed like ages. Scanning over the table of weapons in silence, the tension that filled the warehouse escalated until he finally spoke. I'll take all of them, Tower said, his cold expression never changing. Surely a young syndicate such as yourself cannot yet afford, Shiru began in astonishment, unable to finish his thought before Tower interjected. Didn't say I would pay for them, Tower interrupted. Said I'd take them. Shiru Yashida began to laugh as he reached for the sword dangling from his belt. It was a family heirloom, once belonging to the esteemed ancestor of his, the mutant known as the Silver Samurai. While Shiru did not possess any powers himself, he had trained in swordsmanship since he was a boy, and he knew he could best anyone, especially some petty New York mobster who didn't seem to know his station. "I'll take that sword off your hands too," Tower said, his grim face finally softening into a smirk. "What is it you Americans say?" asked Shiryu, signaling to his men to draw their weapons. "Ah, yes, over my dead body." Johnny Tower reached into his long coat and drew out a pistol that looked as though it had been manufactured centuries ago. Before anyone could react, there was a bang and Shiryu Yashida fell to the ground in motionless heap. "Deal," Tower sneered at him. A split second later, Johnny Tower was bombarded by a firestorm of bullets from the weapons of the other members of the Yashida delegation. Tower tried to stand strong, but he stumbled backwards as the projectiles hit his chest over and over again, the force of the impacts eventually driving him to his knees. When the barrage ended, Tower stood up and dusted himself off as if nothing had happened. "Shoulda aimed for the head like I did," Tower grunted, lunging forward and grabbing a cutting-edge plasma cannon from the table of weapons. He opened fire on the Yashidas, who could only stare in utter disbelief. It wasn't the fact that Tower had survived their merciless attack that made them freeze in their tracks. It was what they saw peering out from beneath Tower's tattered black shirt. A stark white skull gazing back at them from the front of the bulletproof vest. The mark of the Punisher. For many of them, stories of the Punisher were like fairy tales. The vigilante who hunted criminals in the night. The real Punisher, a man named Frank Castle, had lived and died ages ago. So who was this man opening fire at them now? Someone who had styled himself after the legend, or a ghost of the past seeking vengeance? If Johnny Tower had his way, none of them would live to find out. With their leader on ice, he planned to use the tight quarters of their warehouse to methodically pick off each Yashida corp, goon one by one. But there was one thing he hadn't planned for: company. "That's enough," a woman yelled as Tower spewed a volley of plasma bursts towards the cowering Yashida guards. "Let them go." Tower looked up and saw a woman perched up in the rafters of the warehouse, as if she was ready to pounce down on him. "Not a chance, doll," Tower responded, snarling in her direction. "Don't call me doll," the woman said, leaping down to land next to Tower. "Frank." "What'd you call me?" Tower said, caught off guard by the woman using his real name. No one had called him that in decades. As he looked closer, he couldn't believe his eyes. He knew exactly who she was, and he was just as shocked to see her as the Yashida clan had been to see him. "What's the matter, Castle?" the red-haired woman said with a smirk. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Natasha fucking Romanoff." Castle grunted in disbelief. "The Black Widow herself. You look pretty good for, what, 140 years old now?" "I could say the same about you," Natasha replied, quickly dispatching the remaining Yashida guards with a torrent of non-lethal blasts of her widow's bite. "What's your secret?" "Clean living," Johnny Tower, or rather Frank Castle, said. "That and some back alley treatments with some knockoff super soldier serum." "You?" "Same," Natasha replied. "Well, almost. I got my life-enhancing formula from Nick Fury. That old bastard always did have a thing for dames in cat suits." Castle mused. "So what the hell are you doing here, other than blowing my cover?" "Pretty sure you've already done that yourself, way before I jumped in," Natasha said. "But if you really want to know, I've been on the run." "From who?" Castle asked. "Most people have no idea you still exist. Same as me." "That may have changed," Natasha said, careful about how much she chose to reveal to the vigilante by her side. "I found out that Alchemax was hiding a top-secret asset. Something at a level of classification I've never even heard of. So naturally you couldn't resist sticking your pretty little head into their business," Castle said. "What I found there," Natasha continued, "it could change everything." "Well, what was it?" Castle asked impatiently. "Not what," Natasha said. "Who?" "No more games, woman," Castle barked. "If you got something to say, spit it out already." "It was Captain America, Frank," Natasha said. That ain't possible," Castle stammered, caught entirely off guard for the first time in ages. Cap was the reason he had signed up to be a soldier in the first place, long, long ago. But the Sentinel of Liberty had disappeared at the end of World War II, never to be found. "I barely believed it myself," Natasha said, as she played the recent rescue operation in her mind's eye. "But it was him, Steve Rogers, in the flesh." "So where's old Stars and Stripes now?" Castle asked, a ting of hope in his voice. "He saved my life," Natasha said, "and then he vanished. And you're telling me the most elite spy who ever lived hasn't managed to track a guy in a star-spangled armor down yet?" Castle was starting to see some holes in her story. "I've been a bit distracted," Natasha admitted. "After all, I just took your place at the top of Public Eye's most wanted list." "Ah, come on," Castle groaned. "Do you know how hard I worked to earn that spot?" "You're welcome to have it back," Natasha said. "Since that mission I had to go underground, cut all ties with my network. It's been a mess." "So why'd you come out of the woodwork tonight?" Castle asked. "Because I need your help," Natasha said earnestly. "Those aren't words I hear very often," Castle replied. "Especially from a hero like you." I don't usually walk with the angels. Well, you better decide whose side you're on fast, Natasha said, raising her gauntlets and aiming them towards the warehouse door. They're here. Right on cue, a squad of public eye soldiers burst into the warehouse, ordering the Black Widow and the Punisher to freeze. Natasha looked at the Castle, who let out a sigh and nodded his head in mild annoyance. Without a word, he grabbed 2 high-tech guns off the table, tossing one to his new partner. Hit to wound, not to kill, Natasha said as the 2 opened fire on the advancing officers. Or what? Asked Castle snidely as he wrapped his arm around the officer's throat and pressed his weapon against the side of the gasping man's head. Or I saved my last round for you, Natasha said, shooting several public eye soldiers in the kneecaps. Castle released the officer from his grip, letting him slump to the ground unconscious. Death's been on my heels for ages, Castle said, but it's gonna have to wait a bit longer. At least until after I meet Cap. So let's get this over with already. Castle leaped forward and grabbed a tiny metal disc from the table and pressed a glowing button on its surface. As he tossed it onto the ground in front of them, Natasha instinctively began to run for cover, assuming it was an explosive. You're gonna want to stay and watch this, Castle said with a smile, running towards the device as it began to unfold. Within moments, a high-tech turret stood in its place. Frank jumped onto the center of the giant gun and grabbed the handles. Frank, no! Natasha called as Punisher gleefully opened fire on the public eye's forces, raining destruction upon them. Don't get all worked up, he said. I set it to stun, I think. When the dust settled, Natasha raced over to one of the fallen officers and took his pulse. Castle wasn't lying. He had held back from using lethal force. She was impressed. Maybe she had the right choice coming to him after all. See, you could trust me, Castle said. The problem is, he raised a gun and pointed it at Natasha. I'm not sure I can trust you. I know that the Yashidas paid off the public eye, so there's no way the cops would have come here to bust our deal tonight. And like I said, you're the best spy in the world, so they wouldn't have been able to find you either. Castle grabbed Natasha's wrist and gave it a squeeze, forcing her hand open. In her palm was a small tracking device, giving off a locator signal, unless you wanted them to. I had to find a way to make sure you'd have my back, Natasha said, realizing her gambit could severely damage the trust she had hoped to establish with her new ally. And now I've got to make sure you're not going to stab mine, Castle said. Trust has never been something either of us had much of, Natasha said. But if we want to find Steve, if we want to stop the public eye, to beat Doom, I'm starting to realize it's something we're going to need. Castle sighed as he lowered his weapon. Must be going soft in my old age, he said. Yeah, Natasha laughed. You're a regular Penny Parker. Got any leads on where Cap ran off to? Castle asked as the pair exited the warehouse and stepped into the crisp Tokyo night. Just one, Natasha said, looking up at the starry sky above them, and I've got a feeling you're not going to believe it. With a little tension between them, they still went their separate ways. Frank figured it would be a while before he heard from Natasha, but it wasn't too long again before she reached out. Just weeks after the sky ripped apart from the time stream entanglement, Natasha met Frank in a noodle shop. The city lights shined as the rain poured down. Punisher took Natasha on a lead he had on a shipment carrying equipment to Doom. Secretly, Frank and Natasha were able to take down the ship in a rocket that was on board. Natasha told Punisher she was putting together a team. Frank considered everything going on and thought it wouldn't be the worst thing not working alone. With that, we conclude Natasha's and Punisher's stories, and we get to see the rise of the Resistance. This continues on with Cap's story, so be on the lookout for that. And I'm sure that their lores will get pushed out more as the seasons go on. Also, Season 5 of Marvel Rivals is just around the corner, so I appreciate everybody who does support these videos. Please bear with me as I push out these videos to try to get caught up on the current lore. And again, I just appreciate you guys so much for watching. I love making these videos for you guys. So please consider subscribing, liking the video, comment down below what you want to see on this channel. And again, thank you guys so much. I will see you guys in the next